On the next slides are some different types of strategies to use at different points on that crisis curve. So we've got the proactive strategies, a lot of which Shanaz went through when we're looking at the sensory strategies. Even if your child doesn't appear to immediately have any sensory difficulties, they will have a sensory profile and they will have sensory preferences, because we all do. And I think they can still be very helpful for a child who doesn't struggle with sensory difficulty. The point of the proactive strategies is preventing that build-up of emotional arousal. So really sort of heading off any sort of crisis and preventing any escalation. Then we've got the amber strategies, when the stress or emotional arousal is starting to build, and you can start to notice it, or you start to suspect that they might need something to decompress with because it's the particular time of day that they find tricky or particular situation. And then we've got the reactive strategies, the purple strategies, and that's for when the stress has reached a peak or a crisis, and how we have to, how we best support in that situation, because the escalation has already happened. We just want to keep them safe. The ratio in terms of where we should put our energy in terms of these strategies is 70%, so heavily weighted towards proactive, preventing those escalations in the first place. And that can be really tricky, especially when you're busy and you've got other young people to take care of or other adults to take care of, because it involves you sort of being very present and observing your child and knowing what's going on for them. And it's particularly difficult for people who don't know your child as well, to put the proactive strategies in place as well. So a lot of information sharing might be needed there to support that. Then 20% of our effort should go in amber strategies. So what we can do in a moment to deal with a crisis when it's happening, or to prevent escalation to a crisis when you start to notice it happening. And then 10% reactive strategies. They are our sort of emergency strategy, I suppose, for containing the young person and ensuring safety. And these strategies can become our toolkit for supporting a young person and hopefully helping them to build their own toolkit as well. So we've got a few examples of proactive strategies. Distraction can be really effective, depending on your child. Breathing techniques are, there's a reason that they've been used for thousands of years in lots of different cultures. Successful breathing strategies are a sort of a hack, a physiological hack, which sends signals up our vagus nerve to our brain to tell us that we are in control, that there is no danger, and that we are calm. And so they're really effective, but they do need some practice. Grounding techniques for when a young person might be in crisis or might be nearing crisis, but they're still able to respond to you, can really help them to come back into their body, back into their environment. And that also sends a signal to our brains to say we are able to see that we're in a safe space and our bodies are okay, so we don't need to be in survival mode anymore. Self-care and prioritising self-care is important, and especially good sleep. We can never underestimate the importance of good sleep on a young person's ability to regulate themselves. And diet is also really key, and just sort of making sure we have regular meal times, we don't tip into low blood sugar. And then the turtle technique as well is sort of combines breathing and muscle tension and relaxation strategies within a nice little story. That's available in our emotional regulation toolkit, particularly helpful with primary age children, but you might have a secondary child, who sort of older child who really likes turtles, in which case it might work with them too. Finger breathing is a nice visual way for a young person to manage their breathing, because I think breathing is quite difficult for young people to manage, and they don't often believe that it's going to be helpful. So finger breathing is in our toolkit as well. Amber strategies is important at this point to reduce demands, and it's amazing what can feel like a demand when your emotions are escalating. So a poorly worded question, like why, or a sort of a demand that isn't immediately obvious to the young person, what you're asking of them can feel like a big demand at that point. Asking them to do tasks or chores, even if they're ones that they're used to doing, can also feel like a big demand. And so sometimes you have to be quite clever and quite concise in the way that you ask things of young people in this state of arousal. Distraction, again, can still be really helpful at this point, especially if it's a favoured or a soothing activity, and especially if you have a bit of a routine of using that activity and they know it's helpful. Keeping your commands, we shouldn't be commanding, should we? Keeping your instructions really clear, really concise, and using simple language that makes sense to the child. Simplifying your speech to sort of be inclusive, accepting, empathetic is really good as well. And sometimes being quite curious and not sort of assuming that you know what the young person's thinking and feeling is helpful too. Using relaxation techniques, any of those can be really helpful. Removing any triggers that might be contributing to the young person's escalation, especially things like other siblings, overstimulating items, screens, for instance, can be potential triggers, and any sort of sensory things that don't need to be there. Planning in advance, this is a secret weapon really, but it's difficult as well at the same time. But planning for those tricky times of the day or those tricky situations that you know young people struggle with, and thinking ahead to what you can put in place and have ready for those times. For instance, having an emotional first aid sort of kit or a self-soothe box can be really helpful as well. Sometimes having one in the car to take to places can be really helpful because they've got something that they can access. And then we've got our reactive strategies. It's very easy in these crisis moments to feel like the best thing to do is to walk away because they're not responding to you. They could be potentially hurting you. It can be really triggering and distressing for you to be there. But if you can make yourself available, it can be really important for that young person to feel secure and safe. The exceptions to that, I think, are if you are feeling so triggered that you aren't able to stay calm yourself. And in that case, it might be better for you to sort of move away, walk away, and just regulate yourself. But if you are able to stay present with that young person, these big feelings are really scary. If they don't feel in control, that can be really uncontaining for them. And being there can really show you that they can be safe. Keeping your tone of voice calm, because they will be hyper vigilant to tone of voice for potential threats at this point. And so really keeping your voice calm and measured is really helpful. Again, a sort of very simple command, very simple instructions. Not trying to reason with them. They're thinking brains in screensaver. It's not going to be helpful. They can't access that part of their brain, however intelligent they are, when they're in crisis. Using the 3 R's, which we'll talk through later. Removing other people or other things to make the environment safe, and using reassuring statements like "I'm here," "You're okay," we'll get through this, can be really helpful too as well. Sometimes there are still some strategies you can put in place here, but it's definitely not a guaranteed. So that's crisis management.
Yeah, so we have another strategy that you could use as well with a young person. So it's called Name It to Tame It. So it's basically the action of consciously labeling our emotions, because labeling emotions can actually initiate a physical response. So it can signal to the brain to soothe the brain's emotional centers, and it can then calm our bodies and our mind and help us to feel more in control. So for a young person, this will look like in noticing and labeling emotions as they're happening. And it's a good skill for them to learn over time as well, because it strengthens their sort of capacity to be able to be with big emotions and sort of just experience and feel them without getting swept up or taken over by them. And labeling emotions just helps to put to words what the child is feeling. And once you give the feelings a name, it's easier for a younger person to separate themselves from the feeling, and reminds them that the feeling is only temporary, and it will sort of be over soon. The uncomfortable feeling will end soon. Um, and as a parent, you can also support them while they are sort of learning the skill and while they're sort of noticing and labeling their own emotions. So this might look like you kind of just sitting next to them while they're sort of doing this, or it might just be calmly supporting them and sort of encouraging them to sort of remember to do this. There is a tool that would sort of support your young person when they are sort of learning how to do this. So this is called an emotions wheel. They can easily be found online. You can even make them at home. It could be a nice activity to do with your young person. So it's a good tool to use when trying to support them because it's difficult for young people to know and sort of verbalize exactly what emotion they are feeling. So what it kind of looks like is there's different categories on the wheel, and they basically split off into different emotions. So yeah, it just kind of helps the young person to kind of build that skill of sort of verbalizing how they're feeling.
Okay, so sort of thinking about when a young person is having a big emotional response, we talked about the crisis curve and those different strategies. I think the other thing to bear in mind is the 3 Rs. It's a little bit of a sort of a toolkit for caregivers to remember as to how to support young people in those moments. And it's essentially co-regulating. It's you supporting them to regulate. So the first R is regulate. Give the young person time, don't rush them, provide a safe space, reduce those demands and model yourself calm behaviour, which can be really tricky. We fully acknowledge. Acknowledging and naming the feeling, either sort of saying what you think it might be and asking them if you're right, or sort of getting their words if they're able to give them, can be really helpful at this time as well. Using distractors or comfort objects can also help. That is the sort of R that you put into place when you notice that the young person is in fight, flight, and freeze. The next R is relate. It's important not to jump into relating too quickly. You really want to see that fight, flight, freeze response has reduced before you move into this section. But at this point, you can give reassurance, you can provide a comforting presence, you can acknowledge and name that emotion again and attune with that young person. It's really nice at this point to thank them for any engagement that they show in either talking to you, telling you how they're feeling, or just reacting to your presence in a positive way. Because I think that's really affirming for them and it shows them that relating is important in calming themselves down. And then we're sort of able to move into the third R, which is reasoning. Now, reasoning is where we start thinking about reflecting on what's happened, problem solving, and sort of taking actions or making plans for how to maybe do things differently if this happens again. That is going to involve their thinking brain. And so it's really important that they have come down from that crisis to a point of recovery at which they are able to sort of rationalise again. If you jump into this stage too early, then you won't get very far. It's also really important to know that young people will often avoid reflecting if they can. It's different for every child, but they sometimes worry that will take them back into the emotion that they couldn't tolerate, or they are feeling ashamed or embarrassed about the crisis that they've just experienced and want to sort of dissociate themselves from it. So you may struggle at sometimes to do the reasoning part with the young person, and it's absolutely okay to name that and to say we'll have a think about this at another time. Perhaps name a time like we'll talk about this before bed, or we can talk about this tomorrow, or let's go and get a hot chocolate and have a think about this. So long as they know that this part will happen, because ultimately the reasoning part closes the loop, the learning loop, and really helps them to think and reflect on what's happened and how to do things differently next time. And I think it really avoids the dissociation that can happen as well when they have a big emotional response.
Yeah, so we also just wanted to reiterate as well the importance of understanding that teenagers' brains are undergoing development. So as we said earlier, the survival brain is developing sort of the quickest, and then the reasoning sort of part of the brain develops a bit later on. So your young person's sort of brains are still learning how to control their own emotions and express their emotions as well. And the amygdala, which was sort of talked about in the video that we shared as well, which is the part of the brain that controls the fight and flight freeze response. It's a lot more reactive during the teenager years. So your young person might just be struggling a bit more with emotions, just because their brain is still developing, and that's why it's really important to also follow the stages of the 3 Rs and not go straight to reasoning, because it might take them a bit more time to regulate. So yeah, it's just being mindful about that. We also wanted to acknowledge that it can be really, really tiring to support a young person with their emotions, because as adults, we also kind of struggle to regulate our emotions all the time as well. So it's really important to think about self-care, and how you are managing that yourself as parents and carers. So if we have other demands in our life and other responsibilities alongside trying to support a distressed child, we can sort of end up feeling really depleted, and our cup is essentially empty. So, in order to fill our cup back up, really think about your needs. It's not selfish to kind of take care of yourself, because you can't take care of other people if sort of you're not taking care of yourself properly. So yeah, just remember, reach out to your support network. Take some time outside by yourself, do a hobby, things like that. Um, yeah, just try and sort of keep that in mind while trying to support your young person.
Yeah, I think as well, it's very important to sort of practice a form of self-gratitude, really, when we do head off a meltdown, or if we do have a better day, we get a bit of a sense of sort of relief, but we don't often acknowledge our part in it or really congratulate ourselves or acknowledge the progress that a young person might be making, or just the fact that they have at that moment been able to regulate themselves in a way that they've found tricky in the past. And taking a bit of time to really just acknowledge that, those little wins, is really important when you're sort of feeling very depleted as well. So the next couple of slides are about talking to, oh, sorry, a young
No.
person that you are worried about.
Yeah, so you might I mean, here are some sort of strategies and things you can think about when you are sort of talking to a young person that you're worried about. So it might look like being curious. So it's really helpful to ask open questions using a really gentle, warm tone. So you might be asking things like, "Can you tell me more about that? I've noticed this change in you. Can we talk about it? What makes you say that?" Just being curious about what's going on for them. Um, it's also really important to validate their experiences. So recognize their distress and respond to them in a sympathetic manner. Really validate that, maybe things are really difficult for you. I'm sorry to hear that you've been feeling like that. Saying that, if I was in your shoes, I'd also be really upset. So just helping them to feel like their emotions are valid, really. Um, there's also offering affirmation, so offering positive connection to them. So thanking them for sharing their experience with you, um, and acknowledging that it was brave of them to open up. It must have been really difficult to speak about that. So thanking them for that. Um, yeah, and there's also silence as well, which can be really useful for a young person. So as adults and as parents and carers, we might want to automatically sort of jump in and fix the problem for them, but it's really important that we encourage sort of our young people to think about their own solutions, maybe asking them who can support you, what can you do to help yourself feel better today, um, and sort of planning with them, supporting them to do that themselves as well.
Okay, so that's the end of our sort of strategies slides, but we wanted to give you a bit of information about some of the support available. If you are struggling, or if you're a young person struggling with their emotions and you want to be able to support them, our skill line, the schools and colleges information line, You can email in to us. It supports both education staff and parents and carers in the Trafford area. If you do have any concerns, any questions, if you would like a conversation, we can provide resources. We can signpost you to other support, and we can support referrals to schools where our service covers. The email is trafford.skill@mft.nhs.uk. It's the bottom of the slide. If the young person is already open to our service, please do contact their work practitioner directly rather than going through the skill line. We've also got a Silver Cloud offer. As part of Manchester University Foundation Trust, we have a digital mental health programme called Silver Cloud, which supports parents and carers to support their young people. It's a sort of an online evidence-based CBT self-help tool. So CBT standing for cognitive behavioural therapy. It's available on all phones, tablets, PCs, whatever, where you can access the internet, and it's available 24/7. There's a link there to scan and a QR code to scan if you want to sign up. If you do have serious concerns about the well-being of your young person or whether they're unsafe, then you can access urgent support by calling 111 and choosing the mental health option. You can also, if your young person's in crisis, you can also speak to Papyrus Prevention of Young Suicide or Hopeline, and they can also offer confidential support and practical advice. If your young person is in physical danger, you can also take them to A&E if needed.
There's also other services that are able to provide anytime support for children and young people. So we have Shout, which offers sort of advice through text. We also have Koos, which is an online free and anonymous mental health support service, which is available to access. And then there's also Childline, which has lots of different resources and also a helpline that you can also contact as well. There are also services that offer groups and drop-ins. So in the Trafford directory, you can access lots of different services and sort of look through that. We've also got the Proud Trust, we've got Gorse Hill Studios, and Trafford Talk Shop also offer drop-in services. So please feel free to sort of look that up. 42nd Street as well, and Spectrum Gaming. And then we have support as well for parent and carers. So there's Old Trafford Wellbeing Centre, Calm Connections, Young Minds has lots of really good resources for parent and carers. There's the CFC courses as well, and we've got a QR code on the bottom here that you can scan with your phone, which will direct you to the Trafford Family Help Padlet. And then if you're looking for more specific types of support, so if a young person is struggling with a more specific difficulty, there's lots of services out there as well for that. So there's Trafford Sleep Services, the Great Manchester Autism Consortium, the Proud Trust again, and Spectrum Gaming, which looks at supporting young people with any neurodivergencies, and Trafford Young Carers as well. And if you're looking for a specific kind of support and you can't really find what you need, please feel free to contact us through our skill line, and we can sort of support you with that as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shanaz, and thank you so much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you.